can be, I think the wording used by the Supreme Court is that they cannot be, they should not then be immediately effected. And that is the guidance that has been given by the Supreme Court. Senator Cheralgei, how many clerks? I believe I have attempted to answer that question. Yes, there is a question as to how many clerks there were and who was the clerk, but that is a matter of evidence. They have their position about who the clerk was. We have our position about who the clerk was. As I have said, it is our thesis that they captured the clerk. But the assembly needed to continue, and that is a matter of evidence that will then need to be tabled. As an advocate, I am unable to testify to it, but I know those affidavits exist in the record. Who invited the army? Like I said, in the governor's documents, there is an affidavit by a senior superintendent of police, and it is apparent that if he is swearing an affidavit for the governor, then the answer as to who invited the police or the army is answered by the fact of who is the police or the army testifying in favor of. Was public participation done? Yes, public participation was done. Was public participation done in disregard of the court order? I want the answer that I have given in respect of Senator Mungatana's question as to what should be dealt with court orders of the nature or of the species of, that was issued in Meru in respect of these impeachment proceedings to also apply to this to that issue. Senator Wambua, is this the official Hansard of the recording proceedings? I will say yes, but my colleague Mr. Mawira will come and deal with that issue in more detail, and he will explain to this House as to why those are the official Hansard reports in respect of the proceedings. Senator Sigei, the ruling of the motion was the ruling that the motion was of no effect. Is that the motion before this House? Yes, it is. And I would urge this House then to consider that ruling in respect or together with the ruling of the Supreme Court or the guidance of the Supreme Court as to what should be done with rulings of that nature. And if I may state during my response to the questions from the senators, if this House stops this impeachment proceeding in respect of a court order like the one that has been issued, then as an advocate who has practiced law for not an insignificant time, I can say without any fear of contradiction that this is the last impeachment that this House will do, because the courts will then, the court orders will delay and delay and delay. There is a good reason why the Supreme Court took the position it did in Martin Nyaga Wambora, and there is no reason to depart from that position. There was a question as to whether the Hansard is full or abridged. Do we have an audio recording? Again, my colleague, Mr. Mawira, will respond to that. Senator Halwale, no response to the allegation that the documents were cooked. That is an issue of fact. And because it is an issue of fact, it cannot fall from the mouth of the advocate that the documents were cooked. That can only come from a witness. And from our corner, it can only come from our witnesses. That is their position. We have an answer, and it is in the response, or it is in the documents that are brought in support of the motion. It is not an issue, because it is an issue of fact, it is not an issue that can be brought forward and tried as a preliminary issue, as the legal team for the governor seeks to invite this House to do. That is an issue, and it is a contested issue in the motion, and I beseech this House to allow the motion to get to the point where those who are competent and capable to testify to those contested facts are able to do it. In respect of the order, or in respect of the finding, Senator Halwale, again at page 23 of volume 4, again I will repeat my answer to that question. This is an order, the species of which was envisaged by the Supreme Court in Martin Nyaga Wambora. Compliance does not need to take place. It doesn't need to take place immediately. And the Supreme Court then is clear that such an order, when issued by the High Court, should not and cannot get in the way of impeachment proceedings. The High Court's jurisdiction only arises once the impeachment proceeding is complete. When I was on my feet earlier on, I made the statement that what the Supreme Court envisages is an instance where even where the impeaching House is making a mistake, allow them to complete the mistake, because that is how institutions grow. And that is why the Supreme Court held as they did. Again, I will emphasize that these are time-bound proceedings, and if we then expose ourselves to the judicial process, we will never finish. Senator Mudama, clarify if there were sittings on the 18th and the 25th of June 2025. Yes, and that is the only way that the motion could have gotten to the Senate. My colleague will demonstrate by reference to the Hansard in the evidence in support of the motion when and how those proceedings took place. Would it be in order for the Senate to proceed against a court order? Mr. Speaker, I will ask to perhaps add a word in the question that was put to us by Senator Mudama. Will it be in order for the Senate to proceed against an unlawful court order? We have gone to great lengths to demonstrate that that order is unlawful, it is made without jurisdiction, and it is made in circumstances where it is clear and there are binding pronouncements both of the Court of Appeal and of the Supreme Court that that court disregarded, that that court's jurisdiction only arises upon the completion of the impeachment proceedings. Those proceedings have not been completed, and that order is therefore to be ignored. I cede the rest of my time to my learned colleague so that he can cover the other important issues.
Honorable Speaker, my name is Morero Boniface Mavera. On the first question by the majority leader, on who is the clerk of the assembly at the moment, from the Salad Boru's affidavits, the clerk of the assembly, he has sworn an affidavit in support of the governor, in support of the governor's case. From his own affidavit, he confirms that he was sent on leave on 16th of June. He was sent on compulsory leave on 16th of June of 2025. The court suspended the decision, sending him on compulsory leave on 1st of July 2025. The motion that is before you was tabled on 18th of June when the clerk was on leave. It was debated on 26th of June of 2025, still again when the clerk was on leave. Therefore, the clerk cannot be a witness of fact as to what transpired in the assembly on these 2 days when the motion was tabled and when it was debated, because he was on compulsory leave. He only resumed after the court, the Employment and Labor Relations Court, granted him interim relief on 1st of July. On the question by Senator Karungo, the video and audio Hansard has not been filed. It was not anticipated by the Assembly at the time of filing his documents that the governor would be challenging whether there was a sitting. But I have just been informed by the Speaker that he has an audio recording, the Assembly has an audio recording of the Hansard. So if it is required, it shall be filed with the Office of the Clerk. I have checked the rules, Honorable Speaker. The rules do not provide for filing of additional documents after documents have been exchanged between parties on Friday, when we came and served the Office of the Clerk with the documents for the respective parties. So if it is required, the audio recording of the answer, it shall be provided. On the question by Senator Muma on whether there is a social media site for the Assembly, there is no social media site for the Assembly proceedings. So there is no record, either on YouTube or on the Assembly sittings that day. For other previous proceedings, if there is members of the press who are allowed in the chamber, there are proceedings for those days. But on this specific day, there was violence. And as I was saying, Honorable Speaker, this is a matter of evidence. If you go to our volume 1, you will find an OB report on page 42. This OB is on the breaking in on the county assembly on the date of the debate. And with your leave, Honorable Speaker, I would request that our video number 6 be played. That video will demonstrate that the entire Hansard of the County Assembly was vandalized on the 26th of June 2025, when these proceedings, when the debate on the motion was ongoing, and therefore the County Assembly, Honorable Speaker, all the records, including the Hansard of 18th, were stolen. What is more curious, Honorable Speaker, from our video number 9 in our folder, is that the only office in the entire county assembly that was spared is the office of the clerk. And this clerk is a witness for the governor. On the question by Senator Nyamu, whether the governor was invited, it is indeed true. On our volume number 5, page 5 of that volume, that is a letter of invitation sent to the governor. It was served, and an affidavit of service is filed in that regard. On the last question by Senator Omtata, whether on the effect of that court order, a court order that is given by a court lacking in jurisdiction, as my senior said, is a nullity in law. It is of no legal consequence, to borrow the words by the governor's lawyers. On the question by Senator Mundigi, indeed public participation was undertaken. We have 2 volumes, volume 4A and volume 4B on that question. Honorable Speaker, I would request your indulgence for time to have those 2 videos played. They're crucial to this question of whether indeed the assembly sat, because they demonstrate the violence and the vandalism that took place in the assembly on the 26th of June. In that regard, I would request for maybe additional time to play those 2 videos.
Counsel for the Governor, there is a request that has been put forth by the Counsel for the County Assembly to play a certain video in proof that indeed the sittings took place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I seek your indulgence to understand the issue? Do I understand the request by the County Assembly Council to be that a video can be played here which will show that the sitting took place? Because if that is the request they are making, then they can play it. We see where that sitting took place. We'll also be glad to see it ourselves.
Now, Counsel for the County Assembly, it is your case. The question that is before you, there has been an assertion from the team of the governor that no sittings took place. Now, you've decided to play a video in response to that allegation. Is that video going to show us a sitting taking place? Or is it a video showing us a sitting never took place because of certain reasons?
Is you play the video, it is material like any other. Then make a petition. We are not laying any place.
Honorable Speaker, that video, as I've already stated, due to the unique circumstances, the proceedings of that day, the vandalism, the violence, the mayhem in the assembly precincts on 26th of June, the video we're about to play is not a video of the sitting of the assembly. It is a video showing the entire destruction of the Hansard office in the county assembly.
No, honorable senators. Honorable senators, again, I'm going to say it. It is your case. If that video proves that the conditions were such that a sitting could not take place, how is it going to aid your case? But it is your case. You can proceed. Let the council play his... Yes, Senator Omtata, what is your clarification?
I thought we were handling a preliminary objection we cannot begin examining evidence. Otherwise,
Senator Mtata.
yes, Your Honor.
I hear you. Just take your seat. The clarifications that have been sought here is for the County Assembly to indeed confirm that a sitting took place. I think several senators rose to seek that clarification. In response to that, the County Assembly has requested to play a video.
I'm just to say, it's a question of evidence that is contested, and that's what we need to know. If it's a question of evidence contested, then we shall deal with the evidence when we get there. If we begin looking at the evidence now, I would rather we just deal with matters of law, which are matters of preliminary objection, and they had argued it well, and they had said it's a matter of evidence. And if that's the case, that's a matter of evidence, then what's the fate of the PO?
Very well, Honorable Senator. You will make that decision when you debate and vote on the motion. Just hear what the County Assembly wants to show you. It is upon you, using that same line of argument, to either take it or leave it when the time for making decision arrives. You may proceed.
Honorable Speaker, the video we are about to play, and I'm responding to the concern that was raised, is not to demonstrate that the circumstances were that it was not possible to hold a sitting. Our position is that there was a sitting of the Assembly. However, due to the violence and the disruption, and I don't want to go to affidavits, Honorable Speaker, because that's a matter of evidence, as Senator Mtata submits. The circumstances after that sitting were that the Hansard report was vandalized, and that is why, Honorable Speaker, as we came to Senate and as we exchanged documents, the answer that was filed was not a recording of the actual sitting of the Assembly. The answer was vandalized after the sitting. So, Honorable Speaker, with your leave, if the Assembly can be allowed to, that audio recording...
Honorable Senators, kindly view the recording and make a decision at a time when you're supposed to make your decision. Proceed.
Jigi in the boardroom, hakuna kitu ndani boardroom. Boardroom imesafirishwa.
And also video number 9 that shows the office of the clerk.
The clerk anaiko sawa. Clerk anaiko sawa.
Those are the two videos, Honorable Speaker. My final comment on that issue, Honorable Speaker, is that this violence and mayhem at the Assembly was perpetrated by the governor. We will be calling witnesses and lead them in evidence in support of that submission. And Honorable Speaker, it cannot be that the governor perpetrates such violence and ultimately is the beneficiary of his own violence. He cannot benefit from his own mischief, Honorable Speaker. That is the entire point we're making, and that was the importance of showing those 2 videos. And finally, Honorable Speaker, can I get directions on whether that the audio Hansard can be filed with the Office of the Clerk? The Speaker just availed it to me.
Absolutely. It will be considered when making the decision on this preliminary matter.
I'm most obliged, Honorable Speaker.
Counsel for the Governor, you may proceed. You have 15 minutes to make your rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I have a sight of my time? I will take 7 minutes, and my learned colleague, Mr. Theuri, will take 8 minutes. For the record, my name is Elisha Ongoya. Allow me to start with the question raised by the Leader of Majority of this House on who is the clerk of the County Assembly of Isiolo. In answer to that question, Mr. Nyamodi answered, what happened to the clerk? So giving a simple and straightforward answer, who is the clerk? The simple and straightforward answer is to be found in the County Assembly's own documents, volume 5, at page 8. The County Assembly has attached as part of its evidence a document signed by the clerk. That is Salad Boru Guracha. So that is the simple and straightforward answer to that question. Distinguished senators, every time you ask a question and people have to scatter around it for 5 minutes, a question that requires a name of a person, it is manifest evidence there is a problem with that team. Number 2, to the question raised by Senator Ojienda, directly to me, on the question of the affidavits, whether the County Assembly in fact sat, the following affidavits of the following deponents show that the County Assembly did not sit on 18th of June 2025, when this motion is said to have been introduced in the House, and on 26th of June 2025, when this motion is purported to have been approved. Number 1 is the affidavit of Salad Boru Guracha, the clerk. Senators, you will know the role of the clerk in the business of the House, and is a person likely to know whether the House sat or not in 2 respects. Number 1, when he is physically present, and number 2, as the custodian of the official records of the House. He says by reference to both records, either by physical presence or by reference to records of the House, where he's the sole custodian, the House didn't sit. Number 2 is Abdinur Dima Jilo, the MCA for Kina Ward, a member of the County Assembly. By virtue of being a member of the County Assembly, he's a person who can know when the Assembly has sat or not. And number 3, the affidavit of Diba Abdirashid Ali, the leader of majority in the County Assembly of Isiolo. That is a member of the House Business Committee who is likely to know, number 1, whether this business was ever scheduled for that day or for those days for this House, and whether the House in fact sat and transacted that business. Each of these crucial witnesses bring before you evidence that the House did not sit on 18th of June 2025, when the Assembly rather did not sit on 18th of June 2025, when this motion is said to have been introduced, and on 26th of June 2025, when this motion is said to have been approved. Allow me to move to the next question by Senator Mungatana on whether the decision from Meru, my apologies, there's one more affidavit I overlooked, I don't tweet, my apologies for that. There's the affidavit of Shaban Mzungu, the superintendent of police. He was the person in charge of security at this important public installation, the County Assembly premises, which also houses the county governor, so it's the county government premises in Isiolo. He also confirms that there was no business transacted in the House on that day because of the circumstances to which he deponds to in his affidavit. The question raised by Senator Mungatana on whether there has been an attempt to appeal that decision and whether the decision still holds. Now, this is also another very simple and straightforward question because an appeal is a particular act. And I expect the senior counsel, Mr. Nyamodi, to respond more directly to this question. I had him to answer what is the effect of this decision. Senator Mungatana, the simple and straightforward answer to this question is that not even a notice of appeal, forget about the appeal itself, has been lodged in respect of this decision. Not even a notice of appeal. So, not only has the county assembly not appealed this decision, they have not even shown an intention to appeal, which is normally signaled by a notice of appeal. To the question raised by Senator Cherargei, my answer is as follows. This was not a conservatory order. This house has historically had issued the conservatory orders granted ex parte. The order we have here is an order granted after hearing both parties. In fact, when you look at the record of the ruling of the court narrates the order of events, the assembly lawyers were even given time to go to their clients and take instructions and come back and address themselves. So this was an order made after hearing both parties to the dispute, and this is what distinguishes this from the other conservatory orders that this House has had occasion to deal with in the past. Senator Wambua asks us another straightforward question. Is the motion we are dealing with in this House the same motion that the court dealt with in Meru? Senator Wambua, the simple and straightforward answer is this: yes, it is the same motion that the court declared null and void and of no effect. Senator Sigei asks an important question about validity of this motion. Senator Sigei, our answer is as follows. The deficiency of this motion is on multiple grounds, broadly two. One, there is an order of court declaring it null and void. And when it's declared null and void, it is not a valid motion. Number two, it is a piece of paper, as I told you earlier. It is a piece of paper because even for this House, this distinguished Senate, for a motion to be said to be a motion, it must go through the procedures known to the Constitution and the standing orders, be voted upon, and be a resultant motion. It cannot be proper, even for this House, for the Speaker and a few members to sit somewhere outside this House, craft material that look like Hansard, and say this is a motion. So it becomes invalid. And the video that has just been played and the submission of counsel prior to playing that video confirms this more than ever before. Counsel says that the Hansard was completely vandalized and therefore they could not produce a Hansard, which begs the question, the material they have presented before you purporting to be Hansards, where did they get them from? That is not a legitimate origin of a valid motion of a House. Senator Kavindu, you raised an important question. Is it right for the Senate to go against an order of court? Court orders generally involve two disputants, whether it is in a public interest matter like this, a matrimonial case, whatever case it is, it involves two disputants. It is never right for any person to disregard a court order with abandon. We are all consumers of legal judicial services one way or another. And on that day when we get a court order in our favor, we desire a country where that order means something. And therefore, that will be my answer to your question. To Senator Karen Nyamu, whether all the procedural steps were met, no. Procedural steps were not met. The motion was not tabled. The motion was not debated. The question was not put. There was no sitting of an assembly. And therefore, there could have been no resultant motion underpinning this, whatever has been brought before you. Allow me, in the interest of time, to then invite my learned colleague, Mr. Eric Teuri, to continue with the responses to the various questions. And thank you for your audience.
Honorable Speaker, I would take maybe a minute or two in view of the very substantive responses that have come from my colleague, Mr. Ongoya. I think the only question I have is one that was posed by Senator Karungo. At the time when the governor was invited, he was in his office, and at 9 a.m. or at no time was there a sitting, and so there was no way that the governor could attend any sitting because none was held. There was a question that was posed by Senator Osotsi with regards to Article 159 of the Constitution, and my answer to you is that the question we are raising is not one of technicalities. It goes to the root of the dispute that is before the Senate. There must be a resolution, and in the absence of a resolution, the jurisdiction of the Senate has not been properly invoked. And so therefore it is not a technical, procedural issue that can be cured by Article 159, subsection 2, but rather it goes into the question of the merit and whether the authority of the Senate has been properly invoked, and we have submitted that that has not happened. I think those perhaps are just the only questions that had not been responded to and posed to our side. But, honorable senators, let me just remind you that the question with regards to the sitting is one that is extremely critical, and our position still remains that there was no valid sitting of the 18th or the 26th, and that is abundantly clear when you listen to the responses that are coming from the Assembly. You do not know on which side of the mouth they are speaking from. In one instance, the Hansard was destroyed. In another instance, the Hansard is a true record of the reflection of the proceedings that were held in the House. And so that question is the question that we have submitted on, and we urge this Honorable Senate to find that there are no proceedings known in law, and so therefore there cannot be a resolution that has been presented to this Honorable Senate to deliberate arrest.
If I may, Honorable Speaker, with your leave, Honorable Speaker, I request to clarify something that Ongoya Council has misquoted me. With respect to the audio.
If you go that route, we'll never come to the end of this matter.
It's just one clarification.
You may proceed.
Honorable Speaker, what I said was stolen is the video Hansard of 26th. The audio recording of the proceedings of that day is available, and that is what we request your leave, Honorable Speaker, to file with the Office of the Clerk. The audio recording of the proceedings of 26th is available. With respect to 18th, Honorable Speaker, the audio recording was stolen when the Hansard was, that room was vandalized on 26th, but it is after that audio had been introduced into the Hansard that is now on the floor in our documents. That is the clarification I wanted to make. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Now, Honorable Senators, having concluded the hearing of the preliminary issues raised, now pursuant to Standing Order 38, as read together with Standing Order number 1, for the convenience of the Senate, I hereby suspend the sitting for 30 minutes to allow for the preparation and circulation of a supplementary order paper that will enable the Senate to make a fair and just determination on the issues that have been raised. You may rise.
Well, that is the directive by the Speaker, a suspension of 30 minutes to allow for the circulation of supplementary order paper. This suspension of the House for 30 minutes, the House will, after 30 minutes, resume these sittings where senators will be voting whether to continue with the hearing of the impeachment matter before the House, or the other option is whether they'll be agreeing with the counsel for the governor that indeed the preliminary objections raised before the Senate this afternoon and in the morning do hold water. And in the event that the senators vote to agree with the counsel for the governor, the matter ends there. But in the event that they do not agree with that appeal by the defense counsel, then the House proceeds to hear the matter fully before determining it on the 10th. So, as the Speaker walks out of the chamber, closely followed by the members of the Senate, allow me to take you back to the broadcasting house for our normal programming. We'll be resuming.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We spend the rest of the hour looking at climate news as a massive heat dome is bringing record temperatures to much of Europe, with forecasters warning of even more extreme heat in the coming days. Spain and Portugal just recorded their hottest ever June temperatures. Nearly 24 cities in Italy are under red alert heat advisories. In Turkey, more than 50,000 people have evacuated fast-spreading wildfires. France also saw its first fires of the season erupt. This comes after most of North America sweltered under, to say the least, hotter than average temperatures in June. Scientists say the burning of fossil fuels by humans is the primary cause of global warming. This week, the Senate's debating measures to include in Trump's so-called big, beautiful budget bill is set to shape in U.S. fossil fuel policy in ways expected to accelerate fossil fuel extraction, in part by cutting hundreds of billions of dollars of clean energy incentives. In fact, taxing more clean energy incentives. This comes as the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights in the context of climate change presented a new report Monday on the imperative of defossilizing our economies. This is Elisa Morguera addressing the UN Human Rights Council.
So what does defossilization mean? It entails prioritizing the phase-out of fossil fuels, including various forms of financing them within and beyond the energy sector. It means recognizing and prioritizing the phase-out of fossil fuels as the single most impactful health contribution. Defossilization underscores the need to focus on fossil fuels, also in connection with the growing production of plastics and petrochemicals, which cause an additional layer of human rights harms and further diminish nature's contribution to climate regulation and human resilience. Defossilizing our economies then means tackling all the financial benefits the fossil fuel companies are still gaining.
Morguera also called for a ban on fossil fuel industry lobbying and advertising and urged criminal penalties for those who spread disinformation about the climate crisis. For more, we're joined by Michael Mann, the Presidential Distinguished Professor in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science at University of Pennsylvania, Director of the Penn Center for Science, Sustainability and the Media. His most recent research has been profiled in UPenn today under the headline, "Heat Domes and Flooding Have Nearly Tripled Since the 50s. His forthcoming forthcoming book with Dr. Peter Hotez is titled Science Under Siege. His previous books include Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Professor Mann. I was just in Geneva, Switzerland yesterday. The heat dome was intense, and as we know in Europe, they don't have very much air conditioning at all. It's believed tens of thousands of people have died over the last years in Europe as a result of the intense heat. Can you talk about what you have found around the intensification of the increase of heat domes from the U.S. to Europe and beyond?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. It's good to be with you. And, you know, at some level, this isn't that complicated. You make the planet hotter, you're going to have more frequent and intense heat extremes. And we are seeing that. Our climate models capture that, and they predict that that will get much worse in the future if we, you know, as you allude to, continue to burn fossil fuels and warm up the planet. At the same time, there's some subtle mechanisms when it comes to how the pattern of warming of the planet is changing the Northern Hemisphere jet stream. And some of our own research suggests that that pattern of warming, in particular, the fact that the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the planet, is actually changing the jet stream in such a way that it's more likely to get stuck in one of those very wavy patterns that you see on a weather map. And those waves are associated with big, high and low pressure systems that alternatively mean heat, drought, and wildfires in one place or excessive floods in other places. Those wiggles in the jet stream are tending to get larger and they get locked in place. So the same location is under a heat dome day after day, like we've seen in North America this summer, like we're seeing in Europe right now. And that mechanism is actually not very well captured in the climate models. It's an important point because critics of climate policy like to say uncertainty is a reason not to act. It's just the opposite. Our models may in fact be underestimating the impact that climate change is already having when it comes to these damaging and deadly weather extremes.
And Professor Mann, what exactly is a heat dome?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's just an area of very high pressure, very hot, dry air. We've seen a number of them out west in recent years. We had one here in Philadelphia. We were under one of those heat domes. We had triple-digit temperatures, and it's also fairly humid in this part of the country. So you add those very high temperatures, that excessive humidity, and you're talking about deadly heat. Here in Philadelphia, we have a very large underserved population of people who are especially susceptible to heat stress. And so this is a real concern. It's not a distant concern. It's something that is impacting us now.
And meanwhile, we have the Trump administration not only moving in this new bill to reduce subsidies for solar and wind energy, but also to incentivize coal production, declaring the coal industry critical to the United States. What do you make of this direction that the current administration is going in?
Yeah, it's tragic. History will not judge them kindly, because at a time when we need to be accelerating that transition away from fossil fuels towards clean energy, they're doing just the opposite. They're doing everything they can to block, the continued expansion of wind and solar and geothermal and clean energy solutions. And the rest of the world is moving on. So what we have to recognize here is that this is, even if you don't care about the climate, even if you don't care about the human health consequences, any of that, if you care about the economy, this is the worst possible thing for American competitiveness, because the rest of the world recognizes that clean energy is the future. And right now we're doubling down on antiquated fossil fuel energy in a way that is making us less and less competitive.
I want to ask you a quick question. Dr. Mann, this just happened. The U.S. Global Change Research Program's website, globalchange.gov, was taken down, along with information on how global warming is affecting the country. What's the significance of this?
Yeah, I actually encountered that yesterday. I couldn't believe my eyes when I heard that that had happened, and I went to look for those reports, those congressionally mandated national climate assessment reports, they're all gone. You can't access them online anymore. And the attitude seems to be on the part of this administration that if we pretend climate change doesn't exist, if we stop measuring it, if we stop scientists from talking about it and publishing about it, that somehow it'll just evaporate. It's such a cynical and dangerous way of looking at this problem.
I remember when I was growing up, librarians were all saying we need paper copies of everything as the internet, took over. And I just thought they were so old-fashioned they couldn't get used to the idea that the internet was the reservoir of, all global information. But all of this is being wiped away. But let me get your response to podcaster Joe Rogan's interview with Senator Bernie Sanders. Rogan pushed back when Senator Sanders said, quote, the last 10 years have been the warmest on Earth.
There are some people who think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record. And we can create millions of good-paying jobs, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency, to solar, to wind, and other sustainable energies.
I think the climate change issue is very complicated. And I think, did you see the Washington Post piece that they wrote where they did this long-term view? First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that.
So that's podcaster Joe Rogan interviewing Senator Bernie Sanders. Professor Michael Mann, can you respond? He says, talking about this cooling period.
Yeah, they say a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. And here, he probably read a headline, this Washington Post headline, and didn't even understand the headline. Let alone actually read the article. It was about a research article that had been published, I believe, in the journal Nature, which I reviewed at the time and wrote about it. And he got it 180 degrees wrong. What that article actually showed was when you look back over tens of millions of years, and I talk about, the lessons from Earth history and what we can learn from them in our fragile moment. And this is related to this article. They're looking at the changes in climate that have taken place over millions of years and using a climate model to figure out what it tells us about how sensitive the climate is to increases in CO2. Now, in the past, on hundreds of millions of year timescales, those changes in carbon dioxide are driven by very long-term changes in explosive volcanic activity, which puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere on timescales of tens of millions of years. What it shows is that the climate may actually be more sensitive to those increases in CO2. Of course, we are increasing CO2 at a much more rapid rate, 1 million times faster today. And if anything, what this study shows is that the climate may be more sensitive to this increase in carbon dioxide from human activity today. So he didn't understand what he was reading. He might have heard some talking points from conservative radio or television. This is misinformation. Some would call it disinformation, intentional misinformation to mislead the public about what is arguably the greatest threat that we face.
And Professor Mann, your upcoming book, Science, is titled Science Under Siege. The battle over climate change is just part of this war on science of the Trump administration. I'm wondering if you could talk about the impact on your colleagues, on scientists across the United States as university research is being attacked, as accepted knowledge is being questioned, what this means for the future development of the scientific community in this country.
Yeah, thanks. The book in a way is sadly prophetic because Peter Hotez, a public health vaccinologist, vaccine scientist, and I began writing this book more than a year ago. And we had no idea what was in store or how relevant it would be to where we are today, because it really is about this dual attack that we've seen when it comes to the science behind vaccines and the public health measures necessary to deal with pandemics like COVID-19, or the science of climate change. In both cases, we have seen the science attacked for purely ideological reasons. And as you allude to, with this current administration, we're seeing that assault now accelerate in a way that we've never seen before. This sort of assault on the science of vaccines and COVID-19, the science of climate, and we're seeing the defunding of research in this area. We're seeing researchers attacked and vilified and threatened because of the research that they do, because it's inconvenient, again, to certain ideological interests who want to see us double down on fossil fuels, or who have bought into the idea that, vaccines are a dangerous conspiracy. In both cases, the consequences are deadly. People are losing their lives, and many more people will lose their lives if we continue down this current path of anti-science that we're going down here in the United States. It's a very dangerous time for all of us. And, the irony here is that this is a country that was built on science and technology. And the wonders of, modern life are due to the fact that this country valued scientists and it promoted and supported scientists for decades. And now, because certain areas of science have become inconvenient, again, to certain ideologically driven individuals and groups and industries, we find science under an attack. Again, there's almost no precedent. You have to go back to, the early 1900s.
5 seconds.
Stalin's Russia. And the assault on scientists that happened then. To find,
Michael Mann, we have to leave it there. I want to thank you for being with us from the University of Pennsylvania. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more. In an all-night session that will stretch until today, senators have begun debate on President Trump's 940-page so-called Big Beautiful Bill. That's the budget bill. As Republicans race to meet a Trump-imposed July 4th deadline and are set to vote on key amendments. This comes after a procedural vote this weekend was delayed for hours as Republicans hashed out details before a 51-49 vote that saw 2 Republicans join all the Democrats in opposition. Rand Paul of Kentucky and Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina also announced, he does not plan to seek re-election. Tillis spoke on the Senate floor.
It's inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made.
The Senate Republicans' version of the bill makes deeper cuts to Medicaid and health care, even after Trump vowed not to touch Medicaid. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates nearly 12 million people will lose care under the current version of the bill, especially children, people with disabilities, and senior citizens. Meanwhile, the CBO says the bill will add at least $3.3 trillion to the already bulging national debt over a decade. Speaking from the Senate floor, independent Senator Bernie Sanders called it the most dangerous piece of legislation in modern U.S. history.
Actually, though, Mr. President, I'm wrong. This is not a gift to the billionaire class. They paid for it. This bill is an absolute reflection of a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires to buy elections. And when billionaires spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to elect a president or a senator or a member of Congress, they're not making that investment just for the fun of it. They want something in return, and this legislation